Thank you guys for being here. As usually on Wednesdays, give people time to join. So there are people in the waiting room and coming through and popping on. So we'll get going here in about 3 minutes. All right. We go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in our summer wellness series. We are looking at behavioral wellness through a different lens than what you might be accustomed to. So in June, we looked at uh, in parent engagement, how to engage with parents or really any audience that you might be trying to gather the support from. We were specifically looking at PTOs and how to utilize certain skills and communication to help them engage their parents more, and we can made those connections. This month of July, we are looking at conflict resolution and the different things that go into conflicts and how to navigate those different spaces. And that has been a joy to hear your comments, and thank you for engaging and sharing and being giving audience to the group. Last week, we looked at the conflict continuum and how all conflict is not bad, that there is a continuum from groupthink and harmony, uh, fake harmony, basically, all the way over to the other side of personal threats. And so in the middle is where we want to strive for, where there is a balance in conflict, where people are able to challenge and share their thoughts, and we learn how to agree to disagree. Tonight, we're looking at how to listen better, how to listen better, and the things that go into listening and the role they play in resolving conflicts. So, as our custom here to start off our time together, I have a check in for you and just to give you an opportunity to share, let others hear your voice. As always, you do not have to share if you don't want to, but we get used to silence in these groups, so I will give you time to think of an answer. And if you want to chip in with your check-in, that's fine. If not, that is okay as well. So welcome to everyone. And the check-in question I have is sweet or savory? Sweet or savory? What is your preference? You have a preference. You get a craving for something. Do you usually go to the sweet table or do you go to the savory table? Are you going to the sweets and the desserts or are you trying to get some fries and savory and barbecue and going to that direction? Clifton says, sweet all day, every day. Appreciate that, Clifton. Appreciate that. All day, every day. Anyone else? Just checking in. Sweet or savory?
Um, Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I lean on the sweets, but I do like some savory things. But I have to say I would lean on the sweets.
Got it. Got it. Thank you for that. Joseph says savory first, then sweet after. Yeah. Why choose when you can have both? I hear you. I hear you, Joseph. I hear you. Anyone else?
Yeah, yeah, I'm telling you, I'm all for the sweet, and then I want to wash that down with the sweet, and then follow it up by a sweet, and just in case we needed a little more, I just throw a little more sweet in there just to make sure that we didn't leave any sweet out.
Got it. Got it. Appreciate that. Anyone else? Sweet or savory? Sweet or savory? What is your preference? I am a savory person. Uh, Sweets, while I enjoy them, I rarely have cravings for them, nor do I look for them. So if I'm offered savory, I'm not looking around to say, well, this is nice. Where is that dessert table? I will smash all the savory I can until there's no savory left. Um, and so yeah, I'm not really a big sweets person. Uh, but don't get it twisted. Uh, I am currently in Chicago, and so it's a little later, and I had went to a restaurant this morning for breakfast, and whatever those uh, powdered sugar, sweet, puff, uh, Mexican uh, taster appetizer that they put on that plate, uh, that was some of the sweetest sweet niceness I've ever had, and that might change my whole philosophy. But as it stands, I'm sticking with the savory. Nancy says, sweet. Got it. Got it. All right. Anyone else? All right. So the topic for tonight is listening. And I'm going to play a couple videos to prompt our discussion, and then we'll have our time to kind of go through the ins and outs of how this can be applied in different areas. So pull up this first one here.
For you?
Right. I am traveling, so navigating everything on one monitor is very different than using all three of the ones that I have at home. Like, oh, it's a new experience. But here we go. I think I'm good.
a good listener? No, really. Are you? You might think you are because you stay silent while they're talking, nod your head and say, mm-hmm, and repeat back word for word what you heard them say. This has been standard management advice on good listening for ages. But what if I told you that following these tips could leave the listener feeling unheard or even dismissed? The truth is that mastering the art of listening involves a whole host of other skills. You need to do more. After putting away all distractions like cell phones and laptops, is to recognize that listening is an active, non-competitive, two-way interaction. Authors Jack Zenger and Joseph Folkman write that we shouldn't be passive, like a sponge, merely absorbing information. Instead, we need to be active listeners, like a trampoline, giving the speaker's thoughts height, acceleration, energy, and amplification.
All right. So, short little take on active listening. And my question for us to consider and share and discuss is, I like the trampoline analogy. And I'm wondering if there's anyone that has a professional example that they want to share where they've experienced that, either in someone listening to them, or it's something that you've practiced, or just your thoughts on hearing that for the first time. What comes to mind when you hear this concept of active listening?
Well, I guess with me being in healthcare, we actually have to be active in listening. Yeah, going as far as even look at body language, just to see, just to assess the patient better. So let's just say a patient comes in, like, has a neck issue, but at the same time their back is hurting. We go, oh, okay. I'll let the doctors know. Hey, by the way, besides the neck, and then this, and of course, asking questions like, did you injure yourself in any way, or it was just something just occurred? Questions like that. Basically, I'm probing for a lot of answers for a better diagnosis for the doctors in case. Because sometimes just a simple diagnosis on the sheet that we get, it's like neck pain. Okay, well then let's go further than that. Let's ask some more questions. How, like, where does it hurt the most? Does it hurt when you bend your neck side to side? Have you had surgery before? Those kind of questions that I would ask. Besides from what the patient have already mentioned to me, I probe. We're taught to probe even deeper than that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Sure.
Anyone else? Anyone else? This idea of, considering good listening as a sponge, but now hearing that that's kind of standard what we've been taught over the time. Remove distractions, sit there, take it all in, let them know that you're there. But moving away from that traditional sponge over to the idea of a trampoline, where it's heightened and it's responded to and those types of things. Any other thoughts on that concept?
Yeah, I like the idea of the trampoline. I don't know that I've actually heard it like that before, but it does put me in mind of something else that is I've seen in a professional setting, and that is when I think of the trampoline, don't assume that you understood what the person said. And so you bounce it back to them and you express it in a way that is in your words, but bounce it higher, right? And so if you're on track, then they'll be like, yeah, I feel you. Or if you're off bet, you're like, kinda. But the idea of the trampoline is fantastic, but the idea of what I'm seeing maybe a sister concept is, yeah, don't assume that you understand what they're saying. Give them something that is not exactly what they said, but that is similar to see if you're really tracking. So yeah, that's my thoughts. I appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate that. Any other thoughts, comments, reflections?
I like the way Daryl described that. I've never heard that before either as a trampoline. When you first said it, I was thinking like communication because it's like back and forth, like a ping pong table. But trampoline is up and down. So it made me think of honing in, like really honing in on something. Like sometimes it's higher level than lower level. And so that's what came to mind when I thought of the trampoline, was the constantly being on, because sometimes you can zone out, or sometimes you can just kind of like, you kind of just agree just to get the conversation going. So I just thought about be having that constant flow so that you're always in tune. There's no dull moment.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Appreciate that. Anyone else? The analogy or personal experience, professional experience? When we look at this idea of listening and how we are, wherever you see or consider yourself as a listener, I chose that first video because it does a good job of explaining how we have traditionally been taught how to become better listeners. Make eye contact, put your phone down, remove distractions, uh, let them know that you're in that space. And while all of that is good, what we have to remember when there's conflict, there's even a higher need for us to do more. And like Lisette said, it's not just bouncing back and forth. The idea of elevating the time together, right? So if you are in a conflict with someone and that's where you start, you would want to elevate outside of that conflict. And listening is a way we can do that, because that traditional way, while it has its space, it's still focused on you as the listener. And what I like about the active listening is the active listening removes you as the priority and puts the other person as the priority. And when we tie that to looking at ways that we can resolve conflicts in relationships, one of the key ways to move past a conflict is by allowing the other person to know that they are heard and cared for, that they are not an object, that they are a being that is expressing themselves, and you are pausing your life and your time and your existence to receive their information. And there's power there. Any other comments, thoughts? All right. I have another one that will require a little more of your time. And this is some tools on how to actually go through the process of listening. And it also speaks to the filters that we use when listening. And so this one is a little longer. It's about 6 minutes. I'm going to play it, and I would ask you actively listen to it and see what takeaways you have from it that would benefit the group. So let me navigate this one computer again. And go.
25% of what we hear. Now, not you, not this talk, but that is generally true. We are losing our listening. We spend roughly 60% of our communication time listening, but we're not very good at it. We retain just 25% of what we hear. Now, not you, not this talk, but that is generally true. Let's define listening as making meaning from sound. It's a mental process, and it's a process of extraction. We use some pretty cool techniques to do this. One of them is pattern recognition. So in a cocktail party like this, if I say, David, Sarah, pay attention, some of you just sat up. We recognize patterns to distinguish noise from signal, and especially our name. Differencing is another technique we use. If I left this pink noise on for more than a couple of minutes, you would literally cease to hear it. We listen to differences, we discount sounds that remain the same. And then there is a whole range of filters. These filters take us from all sound down to what we pay attention to. Most people are entirely unconscious of these filters, but they actually create our reality in a way because they tell us what we're paying attention to right now. I'll give you one example of that. Intention is very important in sound, in listening. When I married my wife, I promised her that I would listen to her every day as if for the first time. Now that's something I fall short of on a daily basis, but it's a great intention to have in a relationship. But that's not all. Sound places us in space and in time. If you close your eyes right now in this room, you're aware of the size of the room from the reverberation and the bouncing of the sound off the surfaces. And you're aware of how many people are around you because of the micro noises you're receiving. And sound places us in time as well, because sound always has time embedded in it. In fact, I would suggest that our listening is the main way that we experience the flow of time from past to future. So sonority is time and meaning, a great quote. I said at the beginning, we're losing our listening. Why did I say that? Well, there are a lot of reasons for this. First of all, we invented ways of recording. First writing, then audio recording, and now video recording as well. The premium on accurate and careful listening has simply disappeared. Secondly, the world is now so noisy with this cacophony going on visually and auditorily. It's just hard to listen. It's tiring to listen. Many people take refuge in headphones, but they turn big public spaces like this, shared soundscapes, into millions of tiny little personal sound bubbles. In this scenario, nobody's listening to anybody. We're becoming impatient. We don't want oratory anymore. We want sound bites. And the art of conversation is being replaced dangerously, I think, by personal broadcasting. I don't know how much listening there is in this conversation, which is sadly very common, especially in the UK. We're becoming desensitized. Our media have to scream at us with these kind of headlines in order to get our attention. And that means it's harder for us to pay attention to the quiet, the subtle, the understated. This is a serious problem that we're losing our listening. This is not trivial, because listening is our access to understanding. Conscious listening always creates understanding. And only without conscious listening can these things happen. A world where we don't listen to each other at all is a very scary place indeed. So I'd like to share with you 5 simple exercises, tools you can take away with you to improve your own conscious listening. Would you like that? Good. The first one is silence. Just 3 minutes a day of silence is a wonderful exercise to reset your ears and to recalibrate so that you can hear the quiet again. If you can't get absolute silence, go for quiet. That's absolutely fine. Second, I call this the mixer. So even if you're in a noisy environment like this, and we all spend a lot of time in places like this, listen in the coffee bar to how many channels of sound can I hear? How many individual channels in that mix am I listening to? You can do it in a beautiful place as well, like a lake. How many birds am I hearing? Where are they? Where are those ripples? It's a great exercise for improving the quality of your listening. Third, this exercise I call savoring, and this is a beautiful exercise. It's about enjoying mundane sounds. This, for example, is my towel dryer. It's a waltz. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I love it. Or just try this one on for size. Wow. So mundane sounds can be really interesting if you pay attention. I call that the hidden choir. It's around us all the time. The next exercise is probably the most important of all of these. If you just take one thing away, this is listening positions. The idea that you can move your listening position to what's appropriate to what you're listening to. This is playing with those filters. You remember I gave you those filters at the beginning? It's starting to play with them as levers, to get conscious about them and to move to different places. These are just some of the listening positions or scales of listening positions that you can use. There are many. Have fun with that. It's very exciting. And finally, an acronym. You can use this in listening, in communication. If you're in any one of those roles, and I think that probably is everybody who's listening to this talk. The acronym is RASA, which is the Sanskrit word for juice or essence. And RASA stands for receive, which means pay attention to the person, appreciate, making little noises like, oh, okay. Summarize. The word so is very important in communication, and ask questions afterwards. Now, sound is my passion. It's my life. I wrote a whole book about it. So I live to listen. That's too much to ask for most people. But I believe that every human being needs to listen consciously in order to live fully, connected in space and in time to the physical world around us, connected in understanding to each other, not to mention spiritually connected, because every spiritual path I know of has listening and contemplation at its heart. That's why we need to teach listening in our schools as a skill. Why is it not taught? It's crazy. If we can teach listening in our schools, we can take our listening off that slippery slope to that dangerous, scary world that I talked about and move it to a place where everybody is consciously listening all the time, or at least capable of doing that. Now, I don't know how to do that. But this is TED. And I think the TED community is capable of anything. So I invite
All right.
you to connect with me, connect with each other, take this mission.
Apologize for the choppiness. We were able to navigate the remote functionality of an older laptop. It did its best. It did its best. So responses, thoughts, takeaways, anything that you had in there that you found interesting, new, exciting, you've practiced?
This is Andrea. Salutations, everybody.
Greetings.
I don't know if this was only just me or what, but some of it got cut out, like altogether, like no closed caption or anything. So could you, if you have this, do you have the 5 exercises that he, towards the end there, he started with silence and then he did something about like channeling sounds where you just listen to where all the sounds are coming from and then savoring, but then I didn't get the last 2.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I didn't realize that it was cutting out. I mean, I know it cut out, but every time for me, when it picked back up, it didn't cut anything out. It stopped and then started back.
Yeah.
So I apologize for that.
No problem.
Yeah. Yeah, so you have the ability to, and I don't know which ones cut out for different people. but as you go through, you have silence, and then you have the ability to savor. You also can look at channels. So if you're in a loud space, how many different channels can you do? So if I'm in a coffee shop, can I or a peaceful area, can I differentiate between the leaves blowing, the water, the birds chirping, that type of stuff? And the savoring has to do with the mundane sounds and looking at those types of things. um, and the ability to it's escaping me now. I apologize. But probably pull it up here. As I'm looking for that, are there any other comments or thoughts on what you heard?
Yeah, and so the takeaway, the idea of conscious listening, I was get concept that he put up on the board, and he outlined, the different ways to do that. But the idea of making listening a conscious thing, and so that you're actively trying to make sure you're understanding what's going on, not just receive. It was not just being the sponge. So that was what I thought was listening. I have an understanding of conscious listening. That was a deeper understanding. It's like, okay, I'm conscious of what the sender is trying to say. That's making sure I'm getting that. That was useful to me.
Yeah, yeah. The other one is positioning. So putting yourself in different places. And then the last one is actually the acronym. So the acronym, which I pay attention to more, is RASA, and that stands for receive, appreciate, summarize, and ask questions. So it means to pay attention to the person, those types of things. And that is something that I keep in mind most times. The other thing I will do for you is post this in the chat. And that is actually the transcript of the video. So if you'd rather read the transcript instead of watching through the video again, so you can kind of just get to the part that you wanted to see, that's actually the text of the transcript, the response, everything there. So you have that available for you as well. Any other comments, thoughts, or questions on what you heard?
Hello, it's Lisette again. The thing about the listening as a skill to learn in school was very profound. I think that that's something that should be something taught, not just told to do. It's like, yeah, drink more water. Okay. So it's the same concept to me. You have to actually show the person or like practice it with them, just like breathing. I don't know. I just feel like it has to be emphasized. And then I like the fact that it talked about the distractions, and it made me go on a spiritual realm of how that's kind of Satan's ploy to actually distract us enough that we don't get in silence, because it's through silence that we hear the Holy Spirit. So I just got that little portion of that, and I was like, man, that is so true. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. Any other beliefs, thoughts, ideologies? So, as we look at this concept of the tools we can utilize to improve conflict. One of the things that I would like us to consider for this evening is this idea that we mentioned it early on, that conflict is the messenger, it's not the cause. And so if conflict is a messenger and we're seeking a cause, that's going to require a different type of listening. Because as we're brainstorming, as we're sharing, as we're looking at those types of things, wanting to have a grounding collective, an agreement on what the cause is, the only way you and another party can reach that is if you're able to listen to one another. So is there a scenario that someone feels comfortable enough to share where they feel that the conflict could have been enhanced by better listening? Not by the other person, but by you. I know all of us, I'm assuming that all of us can share a time where somebody wasn't hearing us right. That's the easy one to share. Yeah, I was talking and my spouse, my parent, my child, they weren't listening to me. That's the easy one. I'm talking about a specific conflict that you were involved in, either with yourself or mediating for other people, that you were seeking resolve or trying to move things, and you recognized it was your inability to listen that was extending the conflict. Anyone have something brave enough to be out there? Go ahead, Daryl.
Yeah, so I will do that. I'll be what they call the sacrificial first. And so I one thing that the gentleman said right off the bat put me into mind of this, and that is filters. I bring filters into various conversations, and so if I'm at a church board meeting, I walk in with a filter. I have I don't want to say I don't have a short fuse, but I have a very large filter, right? If I'm going into a PTO meeting, parent teacher organization, and I'm an officer at my son's PTO. When a parent starts out, well, I need to answer too. I there's absolutely nothing wrong with someone saying they need an answer to. There's nothing wrong with that. But when someone says, well, what I need, you're like, oh, hang on. When you hang on to that I a little long, what I need an answer. You're like, it is very challenging for me to not put a filter up. And so there are things in my environment that when it's said, and again, just an example, right? So you shoulda. Is shoulda a word? You shoulda. Yeah. And it's not that you shoulda isn't a word. It's very clear that it's blaming. And so when certain things happen, filters pop up, and I have to tear down the filter in order to hear what's being said. And those are both me issues. They're not the other person. They have to deal with their issues, but the you shoulda and the I, when they hold that I for too long, yeah, yeah. So those are my examples.
Yeah, appreciate that. That's where I was going to go to next, which is this idea of whether you're familiar with it or not. It certainly had prominence back in 2020 during the George Floyd times. And after that, there was a lot of emphasis on DEI work, diversity, inclusion, equity. and implicit bias training. So implicit bias, if you're not familiar, are the biases that we have that we don't know about, which cause us to unconsciously filter our interactions and filter our behaviors with other people. And there was a lot of work, and fortunately or unfortunately, there were a lot of law enforcement agencies that were required to go through implicit bias training. So, any of you are a part of that? That's great, wonderful. But here's something to consider with implicit bias. When you are discriminating against someone, whether you want to rely on science or just common sense, the person that is discriminated against cares very little on if it was implicit or explicit. They do not care about whether you consciously discriminated or unconsciously discriminated. And in some cases, it built in an excuse to say, oh, I didn't know it was an implicit bias, so I should be absolved of responsibility and accountability. And so as we moved further away from 2020 and those types of things, the work that we have done is try to let people know that it's not so much the bias that is the focus, it's the behavior. So whether it's implicit or explicit, what we need is for you to change the behavior. Full stop. What we haven't considered, and that I want us to consider tonight as it pertains to listening, is the same is true for how we listen. If there was a 17-year-old female, 17-year-old transgendered, 17-year-old male, 17-year-old whatever, leading this group tonight, all of the comments, responses, attention, and how you listened would have been different than me leading it. I'm not saying better or worse. I'm saying the information could have remained the same. The video could still be choppy. The explanation could be choppy. Everything could have been exactly the same, and you put a different person. Each person on the call is going to process and listen to that information differently. That is something that we have to be very aware of. One of the reasons why we like to do intergenerational circles is to help bring those biases and filters to the surface. Because all of us are going around processing what we hear through other senses. Some of them were listed there. They were listed shortly and briefly, but culture and language and intention and history and all those types of things, we're actually hearing through that. So not only, getting rid of distractions, not all even going through all those types of things, but spending time to pay attention to and assess the different type of filters that you have as a person is a huge way to improve your listening. So number one, move from a traditional sponge type of listening and work at advancing to active listening, where it's a trampoline type of listening. And then number two, whether you're practicing the things that was in the video or not, those 5 things or not, also making sure that you are very aware of the filters that you have when you listen to people and being able to tap into those strengths and improve those weaknesses. Any thoughts, comments, responses to that information? All right. So lastly, I will share this with you before we close out. And that is the idea of the importance of listening as a conscious way for societal healing. While we have taken this subject of listening and put it into our wellness series for conflict resolution, I could put listening into any series that we do. There is very little focus on improving our listening skills for the benefit of healing a society. Many conflicts would be much smaller if people would focus on listening to understand instead of listening to speak. If we would prioritize listening to create space for thoughts to be held, as opposed to listening as a courteous act, just so we can share more thoughts. So I would leave you with this charge that as you go forth until we see you the next time, next week, or any time after that, that you become very intentional about how you listen to others, not just to make them feel better, not just closing your laptop or nodding and paying attention to your body language, but actually taking any opportunity that you have where someone else is talking or any environment you're in to practice listening better with the idea of I'm doing this so that I can make the world a better place. My ability to listen is my ability to heal. The better listener I become, the better it is my ability becomes to help those around me heal. And that is the thought that I will leave us with tonight. Anyone else have a response, takeaway, something that you would want to share with someone else, something you appreciated about tonight? Go ahead.
So yeah, so the listening to heal is the real twist on this whole piece. So I was focused on the conscious listening, which was something that the second speaker gave us some protocols on, but the idea of listening to heal, and I want to just couch it this way: uh, if I'm wiping, if I'm wiping up a mess in the kitchen, I wipe in a certain manner. If I am cleaning a window, I wipe in a specific manner. If I'm wiping a alcohol swab across a wound, I wipe differently than the first two. And so when we're talking about listening to heal, I find, or at least I believe, that there is a finer, a greater differentiation between listening to heal than just listening to understand. Very similar to, I don't wipe water off the floor the same way that I wipe a mirror when I'm trying to clean it. And so when I'm wiping a wound, I am much more conscious of what I'm doing because of what I'm trying to accomplish. Listening to heal seems to be a finer focus and using greater, at least sensitivity than the other types of listening. So I would suggest that just from what we've talked about.
Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else?
So it's interesting because for me, you're told to listen to people. You're told to, you're taught, I guess, in a way to just listen to what they have to say, and that's supposed to help them. But what I got out of this information is that when I'm a good listener, I benefit from it. That's the healing part. I'm the one that can get the residual benefit. And it made me think about how we always talk about service and how when we do service, we're doing it for someone else. But there's always a benefit for yourself when you have service. You always benefit. So it just made me think about that because it's like we're taught to think listening is for that person, not realizing that the listening is for us too.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? All right. Appreciate the participation and providing audience to the content, allowing others to glean from your experiences and thought processes. That is always a good thing. We will continue next week with our last subject on conflict resolution next Wednesday. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and we'll see you the next time you're able to join. You guys take care.